We're expecting tornadoes, hurricane, record warmth, and even heavy snow across different parts of the U.S. this week. It is one of the most dynamic weeks of weather that we have seen perhaps in months, as this is true fall in the U.S. with 4 different types of distinct weather patterns unfolding. So up ahead, we're going to take a look at each one, who's going to be impacted. We'll give you the timeline and where the weather may really be dangerous over the course of the next 7 days. Welcome to November. It's starting off pretty hot. We're starting here on Monday with our severe weather potential, and this is a pretty significant risk, especially for this time of year. You see that area shaded in orange extending from just east of the Dallas metro area to about the Joplin, Missouri area. That's your enhanced risk, and you even have a slight risk which extends from around the Austin area in Texas all the way up not far from St. Louis, Missouri. So it's a pretty wide area. And again, for this time of year, not often we see risks this significant. Pretty rare, in fact, especially considering this is largely a tornado threat. And that area you're seeing in orange, yellow, that is where we have the highest threat for tornadoes. It's a decent threat, to put it in plain text there. But even extending into northern Missouri and into the Austin, Texas area, there's a non-zero chance for tornadoes as well. But tornadoes certainly one of the higher concerns here. Wind also a large concern, more broad, the area shaded in reds where you have the highest threat. And hail is a possibility too, especially between Oklahoma City and Dallas. Now, hail less concerning in terms of loss of life, but property damage, that can definitely be a concern with hail, and especially when it's in more of those metro areas. So that's our outlook from the Storm Prediction Center. Again, pretty rare to see this level in outlook this time of year. But we can also take a look at some of our forecast models, and I'm going to take you to the HRRR here. We can take a look at timing and whatnot. And with this, we're looking at the start of Monday, and we're going to keep a closer eye on this guy here. Didn't mean to highlight that, but you see what I'm talking about. We'll go back to that. Here we are on Monday. It's this low pressure system here right along the Red River as we begin Monday morning. This is around 7 a.m. This is going to help create a lot of the storms we see, and what you can see here in the early afternoon is development pretty quickly into a line, and we're going to see a couple segments sort of evolve as lines and sort of congeal into one squall line as we get into the evening here. So this is 7 p.m. now. You can see that more defined squall line, and within that line is where we may have some embedded tornadoes, certainly strong wind gusts and even some large hail. And that'll take us into the evening across the easternmost portions of Texas, Oklahoma, and into Missouri and Arkansas as we get into the night here. This is now early Tuesday, late Monday night. We can even take a closer look at the central part of the U.S., and you'll see late Monday night is when we have that line begin to come through and create some severe weather across portions of Missouri, Arkansas, even into the westernmost portions of Illinois. And this, again, like I said, this is the next round, the final round of what is really a 3-day period of severe weather across this part of the country. Of course, it's at the very start of our week as we take a look ahead here. I also wanted to show you this too. It's a lot on here, but it basically gives you a good idea of what we're looking at, where that threat is highest in the atmosphere. So what I'm taking a look at here is what the atmosphere is going to look like more so along the border of Oklahoma and Arkansas. In the late afternoon when that threat is highest on Monday. A couple things stand out here. We have our hodograph here in the top and right of your screen. What you're seeing is this curved shape, and it's very elongated. Sometimes we have photographs that look like that, and that can create tornadoes, but you don't have a ton of shear. In this case, we have a lot of low-level shear, so this is a really favorable look for tornadoes. I also want to mention our lapse rates. You can see on the other end of your screen here in the bottom left. You see those numbers, they're between about around 6.5. That's enough to support some larger hail, especially considering that we have a decent gap here in our cape. This is basically, it's not skinny cape. I wouldn't really call it fat cape, but basically when you have that gap and it's wider, it gives you an idea of how strong the updrafts may be, where hail is being created. Certainly you have a hail threat. It doesn't stand out as something incredible to me, but it's definitely there. But really the wind threat's pretty significant here too. And, the hodograph sort of gives you somewhat of an idea of this. When it's elongated, typically you have stronger wind near the at ground level. And here you can see, especially in the lower atmosphere, we're talking about a jet that's going to be cranking at around 50 knots, a low-level jet. Even above that, and that it's likely to pick up too as we get later into the evening. That's a lot of wind, not that high up, so it will not take a lot to mix that stronger wind down to the surface, especially in these squall lines. A lot of times you see that damaging wind threat really become significant, especially in these seasons that aren't the summer when you don't have as much heat and humidity. The squall lines can really pull that strong wind energy down to the surface. So certainly that is why wind is a significant concern here. But this is the scariest look, the hodograph, that curvature you're seeing out here. So tornadoes would be my number one concern, wind number two, hail number three. But all things do need to be watched here. In addition to severe weather, though, we have tropical weather to talk about as a hurricane may form this week. We're going to take a look at what's up ahead as we move into the later part of the week and which part of the U.S. may be impacted by those tropics. Turning to the Gulf now, we can see there is one thing that really stands out, and it is this red shaded area here. That is where we're looking at our next system to develop. It'll be named Rafael, and it has a very high chance of developing here. We're talking about a system that may develop before even Monday begins here. We're recording this later on Sunday. 90% chance for development. If we look at the 2-day here, it's also given 90% chance. So by Monday, I expect we're going to have Rafael out there. And this is going to track northwards approaching the U.S. So again, a matter of when and not so if. We can take a look at where it's going here as well. And this storm has the potential to impact the United States. So if we take a look at, here we are, our map in terms of direction. These are some of our spaghettis, more or less. You can see it cutting up through Cuba here. And all those 72s you're seeing, that suggests that we're going to see this cutting through more so on Wednesday. Again, because we're recording this Sunday, so that's 3 days out. And its potential impacts on the U.S. are going to come in about 6 more days. So really the first half of the upcoming weekend. This storm, while it is in a place where we've seen a lot of strong hurricanes already develop, and by a lot, I mean 2 really stand out, Helene and Milton, there is not as much fuel for this one as the other 2. That said, it is something that we'll need to keep a close eye on. As we get into the 3-day time range, Wednesday, this is Wednesday for you right here, that's when it's expected to make a pass by Cuba. Honestly, the waters are very warm, and we have seen this guidance underplay storms a bit, so it wouldn't shock them if we are looking at something that is in the Category 1 range. So a Cat 1 hurricane moving into Cuba really wouldn't surprise me. General consensus is still that it'll be a tropical storm, but I definitely am leaning towards the higher end of that forecast. Now, as it gets closer to the U.S., closer to next weekend, you'll notice that between Cuba and its approach to the U.S., the strength of it is expected to decrease. And with that said, this doesn't pose as significant a threat as some of those other storms did. Will it be a hurricane when it reaches the U.S.? It's possible, but it does seem more likely right now it's going to remain a tropical storm. Could still be a problem with the rain it creates, but certainly not going to be as impactful, like I said, as some of those others. And we'll keep a closer eye on the rain more so than the wind and the surge with this one. But just so you know, especially as we get towards next week, and we'll keep a close eye on this one. But that's not the only weather coming to the eastern U.S. We actually have records that may be broken up the entire coastline. We'll take a look at some of the heat expected in those areas. The warmth that set records all the way up the East Coast, we were into the 80s as far north as New England on Halloween, is going to make another run this week. And while 80s may not be as likely, they're still possible up much of the coastline, and records may be broken up much of the coastline too. We'll start with our upper air pattern here. What you're seeing, the colors basically more or less indicate unusual warmth and unusual cold weather. The difference here, the catch, is that we're looking at the entire lower 15,000 feet or so of the atmosphere, but it gives you an idea of what the air mass is like, which translates to temperatures at the surface. So we'll move this through Monday into Tuesday, and as we head towards the middle of the week, you can really see this ridge, as we call it, building across the eastern U.S. That's sort of that bubble that bows upwards farther north. Meanwhile, and we're going to talk about this too, we have a very deep trough in the western U.S. That's going to be a big player in our weather when we get to the snow, but again, we'll get to that. Just make note of it as we go through this. This ridge, though, is going to propel temperatures much higher across the eastern U.S., and we're generally going to see a wind that is out of the south and west, which almost always brings warmer weather to that portion of the country. This ridge is going to sit in place for a good chunk of the week, but notice as we get later into the week, it begins to wither away. So we're looking at more so Tuesday, Wednesday. Thursday will still be warm for portions of the East Coast, but the farther north you go, the less so that we're going to see that effect. Meanwhile, this trough becomes cut off. It's now a closed low in the western U.S. near the Rockies. That is a big-time sign for snow. We'll talk about that in a moment, too. But I also want to mention north central U.S., you'll have your chance of some warmer than average weather as well as we get into next weekend. This is the look for next weekend. certainly is a warm one. So let's take a look at some of our temperatures here, shall we? And one of the things that you're going to notice off the bat, again, we're going to go back to the start of the week here for Monday. One of the things that you're going to notice is that as we head into your Monday, there's already going to be a lot of warmth in place across the southeast. So remember that wind's going to be pulling from the south and west here. It's going to pull a lot of that northwards. Also notice how much cooler it is in the west. Those are temperatures below freezing in the mountains out there. I'll move this into Tuesday, and there's your warmth spreading up the East Coast. Not quite on the coastline yet, but we're looking at 80s as far north as Ohio as we head into your Tuesday. Still cool out west. Wednesday, there's that warmth running all the way up the East Coast. And, I do believe we're seeing some conservative temps here, but this is where we may be seeing highs approach the upper 70s. Could even be an 80 in New England. We should see 80s across a good chunk of the eastern U.S. here. Also, it is much, much colder out west. Those mountains certainly struggling to get anywhere close to freezing. Of course, that's going to have a huge impact on our potential for snow out there. Switch to the GFS. Just giving you an idea what temps are going to be like. You can see that cooler air begins to come back across the northeast as we get into Thursday, and that warmer air ends up being more suppressed to the southeast, which will stay warm through much of the week. And you'll notice, too, that as we get into the upcoming weekend, it really becomes more diffuse. Could be a bit warmer than average out here, and it's going to stay pretty cool in the mountains. But that record warmth is possible, especially on Wednesday up the East Coast, especially in the Northeast, where it is very dry right now. We have drought conditions across a good chunk of the U.S., and that's helping to make things a bit warmer. That when you have low soil moisture, the air stays drier, it heats up a lot easier. So that's what we're going to see. But you heard me talk about snow. I want to get to that potential for snow in the mountains, as this could be the first really good week for some heavy snow, and it may even find its way down a little bit lower in those elevations. So let's take a look at who may be in line for some winter weather this head. So here's that potential for snow in the Rockies, and what you're going to see is our system out in the northwest. That's sort of the start of our system that ends up becoming the closed-off low, and it's really going to settle in right around here. So you're going to see it drop farther south. But all that blue coloration, that indicates snow, and what you're seeing as we move this forward is it beginning to dive south. Here we are on Tuesday, Wednesday now. Wednesday could drop a decent amount of snow into even the Denver metro, so that's kind of an exciting one to watch if you like the snow out there. And it's really just going to sit there for some time. That low does not move much, and that's why we could be looking at quite a bit of snow in the mountains. Could be some storms also out here off the mountains. It's tough to say if we're going to see anything severe. I actually haven't looked super closely at that, but let me actually take a quick look at temperatures, because that's really what's going to determine if we have the instability. And with highs that may be having a hard time getting out of the 50s, I'm inclined to say severe weather's a little more on the unlikely side. But back to our snow, which is what I want to focus on. Here we are, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Again, you can see that clump, that storm system, not moving much because we have that upper level low. It just keeps the atmosphere unstable, and in this case, you're going to have more persistent rain and potentially snow out there too. Now that, if this can actually shoot something off to the east here, this may be in the weekend, then you could get something severe out in this part of the country, but there's still a lot of uncertainty with that one. Just something to note, though, if you live between Kansas and Texas. Maybe Friday, Saturday, you have a chance at another round of severe weather. But for now, it's the snow that's the biggest deal out west. We can even take a look at just what some of our weather models are suggesting for our mountains. And, I wouldn't put too much into it, but it is worth noting that we can get, somewhat of an idea. And as we head through the week, basically between today and the end of the week, we're looking at what may be basically anywhere you're seeing those orange colors in some of the higher elevations. We're talking about it could be 2 feet or more snow, 2 to 3 feet in some of those higher mountains. We'll take a closer look at the Denver area because obviously that's one of our population centers. It's kind of off on the edge of your screen. We're going to take a closer look at that. We'll use central U.S. Denver, of course, doesn't have a good view here. But, even into the Denver area, we're talking about what may be, a good snowfall, at least 6 inches up to a foot, depending on your exact elevation. But that's sort of that's sort of the edge of the Rockies as they begin to slope downwards into the lower terrain. And that's a good snowfall to start off the year. Definitely good for ski resorts out there, and it's going to set the season off to a good start for sure. But that's your snowfall out in the mountains. Anywhere you're seeing those orange colors, that's a good 2 to 3 feet, even more in the highest peaks. But even off the mountains, should be enough to shovel as well. The flat terrain out here, well, eastern Colorado not as much, but still still enough to probably shovel out there. So worth noting, it'll be a nice week if you like that winter weather, especially for those of you guys who like skiing. We'll wrap this up, but I also want to take a quick look at fall foliage. If you haven't seen any yet, you may have missed the best of it, but there are some areas that are still going to see peak color this week, so we'll let you know who's in luck in terms of the colors on the trees and, how much longer we have left in the season to see anything. Like I said before, peak fall color may be in the rear view here. You can see everything shaded in that dark brown past the peak. But if you're in somewhere like St. Louis, down towards Memphis, Tennessee, Nashville, Tennessee, out even in the Carolinas, if you're not in the mountains, you may still get a good look at color this week. I'll show you where we go over the next week, though. That those areas I called out, they're pretty much done with the color. And it really heads towards the south by the middle and later portion of November. I mean, this is now the end of the month, and you can see we're pretty much past our peak everywhere. If you're lucky, though, you may be able to get some decent color if you're on the coastlines out here, across the Northeast through this week. The coastlines, down through, Virginia may be pretty good over the next week or so, but the best of the color is definitely in a review. Just thought I'd mention. West Coast, again, closer to the Pacific. You get some decent color on those coastlines around now, but the best of the color out here is really beginning to fade. So hopefully you get a chance to see it if you're in some of those more mild climates, because for most of the country, this is it. And if you missed your window, well, it's going to be winter before we know it. All right, guys, with that, we'll wrap things up. Remember, wherever you are, stay safe. Listen to your local officials. Take advantage of the good things you get, though, whether it's that last fall color or some of that last early fall, late summer-like warmth. Just take advantage. And, of course, keep a close eye if you live in the southeast on that potential storm, Rafael, on those tornadoes, especially if you're in Oklahoma, Arkansas, Texas, Missouri. It's really important to have a way to get warnings. Make sure you have that. And if you live in the West where there's going to be snow, hopefully you can make the most of it. Hopefully you enjoy skiing, things like that. But make the most of life this week. And I really hope you guys stay safe and have a good week as we head through the first full week of November. Make sure to subscribe, follow along here, like, whatever it is. We'll be here next week with another update on your weather forecast.